Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Virginia Morris. We're honoured to acknowledge Mr. Ross Ermel, Defence Assistant Deputy Minister and Digital Transformation Officer, Canada, and Rear Admiral Luciano Corosielli, Chief of Staff, Information Management, Canada, accompanied by Mr. Chris Crozier, Defence Chief Information Officer, and Dr. Paul Robards, Defence Chief Data Integration Officer, and the accompanying delegation. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome the members watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection. The following beads will be laid by visitors to the memorial.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Ronald George Pinkerton. Ronald Pinkerton was born in Hobart on the 25th of September 1919, the son of George Henry and Doris May Pinkerton. He grew up in West Ulverston in northwest of Tasmania, where he attended school and went on to work as a railway porter. Ronald Pinkerton enlisted for service in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force at Launceston on the 25th of June 1940. He was allocated to the newly formed 2nd 40th Battalion, the only battalion to be recruited almost entirely from Tasmania. The 2nd 40th assembled at Brighton Camp in July 1940, where it spent the rest of the year training. A month after enlisting, Pinkerton was admitted to hospital with mumps. He returned to duty not long afterwards, and in early January 1941, joined his battalion at Bonegilla Camp near Wodonga on the Victoria-New South Wales border, where it joined the 23rd Brigade, part of the 8th Division. In February 1941, the 2nd 40th was earmarked for deployment to Dutch West Timor to protect the airfields in the event of a Japanese attack. However, it was thought premature deployment might provoke Japanese action, so the battalion was held back in the Northern Territory until Japan's intentions were clear. They became obvious with simultaneous attacks throughout the Asia-Pacific in early December 1941, and the 2nd 40th was rushed to Timor on the 10th of December, arriving at Kupang 2 days later. They formed the bulk of Sparrow Force, which defended the airfield at Penfoy, the operational base for the Hudson bombers of the No. 2 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. Like the other forces named for birds and deployed across the islands to Australia's north, Sparrow Force was ill-equipped and likely to be overwhelmed by an enemy attack. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel William Leggett, made repeated requests for greater reinforcement, artillery and supplies, but his requests were never met. Japanese air attacks on Timor began in late January and increased intensity over the next month. No. 2 Squadron withdrew to Australia on the 19th of February, leaving doubts about the role of Sparrow Force. The Japanese attack began the following morning, with an amphibious landing south of Kupang, a parachute landing to the east. Faced with a strong advance from the south and enemy paratroopers on the road, running inland into the Allied supply dump, Sparrow Force destroyed the airfield and began to move inland. In the following days, the small force battled its way along the road towards Champlong, overcoming several Japanese positions including an entrenched position at Usaye. By the morning of the 23rd of February, however, the odds against Sparrow First were mounting. Food, water, and ammunition were running out. Casualties were mounting, and the large Japanese force was closing in on them. The Japanese delivered an ultimatum to surrender or be bombed, and most of the men became prisoners of war. Some who escaped inland were later captured. Some joined the Second Independent Company in the hills and were evacuated in December 1942. The prisoners spent their first period of captivity interned in a camp at Uspara Bazaar. A small party of senior officers was shipped to Java in July, and the rest of the prisoners on Timor followed in September. From there, they were dispersed throughout Japan's conquered territory. Pinkerton was declared presumed missing on the 22nd of February 1942. It wasn't until June that the Pinkerton family at West Ulverston in Tasmania were advised that Ronald was a prisoner of war. In September 1945, they learned that he'd died of illness 3 years earlier, on the 24th of February 1942, 2 days after he had been declared missing. In 1946, his remains were exhumed and reburied at Ambon War Cemetery, where they lie today. Ronald Pinkerton was 21 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving during the Second World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Ronald George Pinkerton, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If able, please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières, or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, They will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.